Thirumaran Ikambram is a seasoned data science and AI leader with over 27 years of experience driving business impact through advanced analytics, machine learning, and cognitive technologies. He is currently the Director of Data Science at Ericsson's Global AI Accelerator Center of Excellence and is focused on leveraging AI ML for telecom. Welcome on the stage, sir.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So we are about to see big changes in AI that will improve our lives in ways we don't imagine yet. So the GenAI is going to make that happen. And it's going to be a lot to talk within 10 minutes, but I'll try to keep it brief as terse as possible. If required, we could have a conversation after the session is over. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, why is this a transformational wave? Because it shares many characteristics similar to the earlier big changes that we have seen. So for example, internet or smartphone, some of the characteristics that it shares is in terms of the ubiquitousness. It's there everywhere, it's being used by everyone, it is omni-use, it's across multiple domains. And beyond that, GenAI also is bringing in a lot of creativity, and that's going to have a big impact in our daily lives. The rate at which this technology is being adopted also is going to be very humongous, and as we have seen in the last 1 or 2 years, the change that it had brought in. GenAI is also changing the way we interact and the relationship we have with technology. So for example, earlier we were learning language to interact with machines. Now the machine learns the natural language and is able to talk to us. So other way of looking at it is also like earlier machine was just merely a tool. Now we are looking at machine as a partner, a teammate, a collaborator, or a personal intelligent assistant. So there is multiple opinions about this, whether it is there or not there, and which camp we want to really follow. One camp is talking about this is all just hype. There's not much really there from an intelligence perspective. It's purely a model that's predicting the next word. It's just using statistical regularities. However, it had passed the LLM has passed Turing test. And the other camp is saying that like it's already there, AGI is there, and we need to really contain this before it becomes rogue, right? Like, so we need to be looking at where it's really there, what is the technology behind why we are seeing what it's providing now. So if you look at it, the AGI trigger comes from the emergent capabilities GenAI demonstrated. So how does that emergent capability itself is coming, right? Like if we look at GenAI in a very simple term, it's nothing but unsupervised learning plus RL. And there is an article written a few months back that Ted Chiang had mentioned that if we look at ChatGPT as a whole, like it's primarily creating a compressed view of the world, right? And very good compression algorithm means it can reproduce with very high fidelity. If that is the case, the compression should be really understanding it. If you take an example of a document with million arithmetic examples, a very good compression algo means that it had learned the principles behind arithmetic operations. So that's a very good algo. That's what ChatGPT is trying to do, or GPT is trying to do as well. It's trying to get a very good understanding, and that understanding really is where the learning and the reasoning capability is evolving from. So apart from that, it's also having other emergent capabilities in terms of few samples to learn, and as we all have seen, it takes different personas based on the prompt. So all those comes from, again, from an alignment perspective. It's able to very easily take a different persona, right? Like, and that again is like two aspects are there to that alignment. One is following the user intention, and also it has to cater to the societal norms and ethics. We can't have the GenAI let loose if we just allow the GenAI to follow the instructions, right? Like it has to really look at how does it handle the toxicity or bias that it could be introduced by the user prompts. So moving on to the next slide, please. Okay, any new technology has growing pains, and GenAI is nothing different from that. As we saw the compressed view of the world, so whenever we are trying to reproduce something out of it, we are going to be interpolating or extrapolating, and the RL that we talked about, which is leading to this alignment and the creativity aspects, it's going to really create this hallucination. So this is something that we need to be looking at, but it's improving as we see the GPT evolution itself. And the reliability is still something questionable, but it's getting there, right? The LLM models are good at some areas, but it's still not at a stage where we could produce top-notch products with very good accuracy. It's not going to be a one-size solution or one-fit-all, like solve everything that we see because of the long fat tail that we see. The fat tail comes because of the diverse problems that one needs to solve. But at the same time, GenAI could still help there because these long fat tail problems are going to be small, and with some prompting, we should still be able to get decent solution out of it. So another issue that we will have to look at is from a data availability standpoint. As the models become larger and larger, the amount of data we would need to really train them is going to become sparse or scarce. The way people are looking at is like having another LLM generate and then create more data, but it's like making a guess to again learn a guess, right? It's going to be like that. So that's something we need to be aware of and be cognizant about that, and the data curation is going to be very critical in that scenario. Last but not the least, like data security, we should be careful about the data leakage, the privacy concerns, the copyright issues, without which the adoption is going to be very difficult. Next slide. Okay, I'm not going to look at every aspects that are getting changed because of the GenAI technology. So few things I just wanted to highlight here. The first one is the interface. The future is going to be more about conversational AI with multimodalities. That's going to be the future, the way we interact with the machines. And the second aspect, it's going to be more about the way we talk as humans as well, right? We don't make single exchanges. We discuss, probe, seek clarity. So that's a way we would be really looking at interacting with GenAI as well. Only then we could really get the better enhanced outcome from GenAI. The second aspect is reasoning. Like as we have seen, as models are getting larger and larger, reasoning is a capability that's emerging. It's again through that compression and the alignment that we saw earlier. So it's really coming out of that, but it still need to be improved. There's a lot to be done. Like GenAI probably alone won't be enough to really get there where we want in terms of reasoning. We should be really looking at upcoming technologies like forward networks or liquid neural networks or some hybrid combination algorithms like neurosymbolic logic to really pave the way for advanced reasoning. Safety is another critical aspect where intense development and focus is going on. OpenAI recently announced that 20% of the compute budget is going to be really spent here, right? So alignment is just one subpart of the safety. There's so many other aspects with respect to safety. One simple example we could look at is, and when we are talking about RL here, it could really get into a reward hacking mode as well, right? Like because we want to just maximize, and the maximization could be done even without adhering to the standards or the corporate ethics or the user intentions. You could still maximize, and we need to be careful about how do we handle that. The last one is about agency. So agency is again critical. It's basically talking about like the machine having autonomous power to interact with the environment and change it. And that's going to be really critical along with the alignment to really get to the super intelligence that companies like OpenAI are talking about. So agency again creates additional issue with respect to safety. So we need to be really aligned and then see how we can balance this out. Next slide. Okay, so all this is good, like, and as we saw the GenAI, if you want to really get a better outcome, we need to have multiple interaction with it, not just a single API call. So that means like more call to do one single job, right? So the cost is going to be high, and as models are becoming larger and larger, the compute becoming scarce, it's going to be really big. And do we should really think about investing in this space, right? Like, so two ways to look at it. The one way is like in the short term, we could look at using closed source APIs, which are much more cheaper. But as we see more adoption and there is huge volume of usage, the self-hosted model could really take over and we should be able to switch to that. The other aspect comes from Jevon's paradox, which basically claims that if we are reducing the marginal cost by half, it basically means that the demand is going to be more than doubled. So in that scenario, the overall cost is going to be the same. It was done in case of resource utilization, whether resource utilization is going to come down if the cost is dropped, but it still applies in the IT case as well, in the GenAI case as well. If you look at what has happened in the earlier technologies that we have seen, internet reduced the marginal cost of distribution to nearly zero. Cloud reduced the marginal cost of storage to zero. So similarly, one could expect the GenAI to really reduce the marginal cost of creativity to be zero. And that's going to really create a lot of demand, and it's going to be boosting the adoption further, and this cycle is going to cut down the cost further. So it's still, from those perspectives, an interesting area to invest and pursue. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but some examples from a telco perspective. Google, for example, announced in some article that there are 4,000 ways of people using to set an alarm in the phone. Just for setting alarm, there are 4,000 different ways. So we can see the user variations one would expect, right? Like when we get into more complex things. So GenAI could really understand that, understand the intent, we can recognize it, and then help translate and things like that. And with telco as well, as we are moving towards more cognitive networks and intent-driven automation, so GenAI could clearly play a role there. In combination with that, and if you look at GenAI as a central orchestrator as well, intent recognition and then natural language interaction, and with more agency, for example, coming into play. So for example, like Vonage recently announced a Magenta Business API, which can provide or expose network slicing as an API, right? So as things evolve in those space, we could think about GenAI really playing the central orchestrator. There are many real world examples where people have really done bad in terms of working in a stressful environment. GenAI could really fit in their case as well, like where users are in a stressful environment, it makes it much easier to follow procedures by verbally communicating it to, rather than going through a sequence of steps. So there's multiple one-click navigation, those kind of work is happening right now. And it also helps with the knowledge gap, addressing the knowledge gap when new people are onboarded. Security is another area where it could really bolster. We can think about the GenAI generating a lot of detection rules, like threat scenarios that could help address threat actors. It could become a policy assistant and things like that. Visual intelligence, another example we could think about, where it could help the technicians on the field do visual verification and feedback and help improve their productivity. Metaverse, for example, with 5G and 6G, GenAI could again boost the expansion of digital twins. We could think about a lot more personal assistants using AR, VR and stuff like that. So next slide, please. So how do we really be prepared for this GenAI driven future? One thing is, like as companies like OpenAI or Anthropic are talking about super intelligence, it's going to become difficult at some point where humans can't really manage the complexity of tasks, and it's going to be critical for having a combination of human plus machine to do the scalable oversight. So that's going to be critical. And how do we really differentiate from these generic models that are available, right? Like our open source model that are available. There could be several strategies. One could be probably looking at company specific or domain specific knowledge graphs that we could build and integrate. And that could also provide some validation to avoid the hallucinations that we are currently facing. The other aspect could be to build a foundation model which is specific to telco. And in that scenario, the one thing that we need to be aware of is how good the reasoning is going to be in that scenario. Because when we are talking about a generic LLM which is trained on the entire web, for example, including all mystery novels, reasoning would be much better than looking at 3GPP documents and product manuals, right? Other aspect we should be looking at is what is the right project, like how do we really convince our management and the customers, right? So we need to be picking up on GenAI strengths and what are the key strengths that we could really leverage, pick the right project that will demonstrate it and as well as show the real world impact there. We shouldn't be again looking at using all these large models for every task. Like it would be very like looking for having an hammer and looking for everything as a nail, right? So it shouldn't be like that. We should also have a responsible AI team within the company which could manage the content moderation and also support corporate or company specific ethics and standards incorporated into that. The rapid pace of innovation that we are seeing, it's really hard for a single company to really focus on unless we are OpenAI or Anthropic with a lot of billions of investment to support this, right? So it would be better to partner with trusted vendors, at least in the initial stages, till we get to a good adoption and we showcase and reap some benefit out of this. They could also help with like the current challenges and the emerging challenges. Like current challenges probably would be maybe easier, but emergent challenges, we don't know even what's going to come up. So it's much easier to partner with somebody in that space. Last but not the least is we don't know exactly when this GenAI is going to become AGI or super intelligent AI, or what's going to happen in the next year or what's going to happen a couple of years later, right? But one thing for sure is this is going to really transform. It's going to disrupt the way we work with machines. And we need to be really prepared to handle this, rise up to the challenge. We need to make an assumption that the reliability and controllability issues that we are facing today with GenAI would be solved in the near term, maybe 1 or 2 years, and then be looking out for use cases that we can really leverage this. So with that, I'll end the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that insightful keynote. I would now welcome all the panelists on the floor. Dr. Shailesh Kumar from Reliance Jio. Welcome, sir. Then there is Azhar Said, Senior Director with Red Hat, Mr. Pranav Arora, Accenture, Mr. Anku Jain, Managing Director, MediaTek, Ms. Pratibha Sirish Bachchu, Head of Bosch Service Solutions India, and Milind Pathak from Root Mobile. Welcome, everyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon all the fellow panelists. It's a packed house, and for a topic that we are most interested now when it comes to AI, generative AI, it's a topic that gets widely discussed in every forum. No conversation on innovation or emerging tech ends without a discussion on AI. And now with generative AI becoming more popular and adaptable, it is important that we have a conversation in every discussion. Thank you very much for this excellent introduction. You've actually reduced a lot of my effort in setting the context. But because the conversation is around generative AI, and to kickstart, I thought there are two statistics that becomes very important for us to discuss, and then that could become the basis of our conversation today. What has actually changed with the generative AI and the new LLM models that have been introduced in the late 2022? Nothing, I mean, what drastic has actually changed in the whole process? There are two things that have actually changed. One is the introduction of LLM, making it more accessible. Second is the compute itself and the capacity around that is transforming. These are two big changes that are happening and transforming the way we are adopting AI. As KPMG, we did a survey of around 350 CEOs in the last 6 months. We did this at the back of our global survey as well, and the impact of AI was something that we were trying to compute because we wanted to understand where is the investment going to go. Okay, and interestingly, when we interviewed around 350 Indian CEOs, 66% of them said that a large portion of their investment is going into research, specifically in the area of generative AI and how they can adopt it. If they are not selling a service-based product, it is how to optimize their own processes. So every organization is now looking at it. 66%, I'm sure when we do the survey again next year, it'll be upwards of 80-85%. The second important statistics that I thought will be important for our discussion is what Gartner has actually quoted. Gartner in 2020 quoted that only 5% of enterprise applications actually adopt and use AI to remodeling their outcome. That percentage as on today from Gartner is 40% by 2024, which means that there is something that has actually transformed both in terms of technology and change. So with that context, I thought I'll start my panel, and I've got an esteemed panel. I've got panelists who are transforming the way technology is getting adopted, being familiarized. Research is being done by some of our fellow panelists in their organizations. New models are being developed. We also have representative from the chip design team as well, which is also transforming the way AI is being viewed. We have panelists from who have adopted generative AI and build use cases around it. We are going to get some understanding on what they have seen and what has been the outcome and challenges. I also have an esteemed panelist from the telecom industry, specifically from a service provider, who are partnering with NVIDIA and also transforming the way AI is getting adopted, especially when it comes to adopting it for native language translation. So with that context, maybe Ankur, if I could go to you. Ankur, when it comes to generative AI and the technology surrounding it, you have gone on record from your organization to say that you have started adopting a lot of different models. You're also seeing, because you are from the chip design field, it is very important for us to understand what is actually changing in terms of technological advancements. How do you see as an organization? If you could throw some light on what your role is in the context of this, and how is MediaTek actually transforming the way it is?
I think we have been on panels before, so I hope you ask easy questions. So I'm Anku Jain. I'm heading MediaTek in India. So I'll kind of answer this in two different segments. One is about, generically speaking, what is about generative AI. And I think we saw in the previous slides a bit about that. So, and where is the opportunity for, organizations and startups and so on. So if you see generative AI, I will kind of split into three levels. One is the LLM itself. Now that LLM is being written by big companies like Google and Facebook and so on. Now that is one segment where research is happening. The second is about fine-tuning of that LLM, and then you kind of fit it into a specific use case. So I'll give an example of being an angel investor. I keep coming up across companies who are using this technology. So there's one company which is to deal with finance, and they have actually fine-tuned a Blue 176 LLM, and which is specifically for assessing the technicals of stock growth and so on, right? And then they have kind of fine-tuned this model and made it specially adapted to the Indian context. So that can give insights into way to invest and so on. So I don't know how that works, but that's the kind of use case. So fine-tuning the LLM. And the third, of course, which is the most available and most potential, which has for the startups and others, is about using generative AI to solve a business problem. And that's where I think there's a lot of opportunity that, for example, if you want to take help on crunching in Excel, so generative AI can actually help you to do that. So it's like a tool, right? So and there are a lot of use cases or business problems which can be solved through generative AI, and that is a huge opportunity area. Now coming specifically for MediaTek, MediaTek has been working on AI for last several years. So our chips, we are a chip design company, so we design chips for several verticals like smartphones, smart homes, smart TVs, and recently about auto and so on. And so the AI engine itself helps. We have a APU, which is a AI processing unit on the smartphone, which can help in things like noise reduction when you take a photograph and so on. So that is about AI. Now, generative AI is a new thing which has come up, and we are very excited by that. So recently, we have collaborated with Meta's Llama 2 LLM. Now, that is the great thing about this is that this will work on the edge, on the device itself. So instead of communicating with the cloud, it can actually work on the device, and that helps to have quick response time because you don't need to communicate with any server or any cloud. It has good privacy benefits and very low latency and so on. So things like and what MediaTek has done is that we have our own transformer acceleration engine. We have the own NeuroPilot engine and so on. So these can work together to give a software stack that can create very efficient and good inference from this cooperation. So I think that's where we are going at. So the key point is that it can actually have hardware acceleration in this Meta's Llama 2 LLM. Yeah.
Thank you, Anku. What you're saying is that you have gone and started focusing on one particular technology and one LLM model. But I'll maybe go to Azhar. Azhar, you come from Red Hat and you believe in obviously recommending your clients open source technology. A lot of advancements happening there on open data architecture as well. With the discussions that you are having with clients, what are you seeing as some transformational areas where generative AI is being used? How is technology itself transforming, and what are you recommending? What are you seeing and recommending to your clients?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. My name is Azhar. Hello. Sorry. Thank you, Puru. My name is Azhar. I work in the area of autonomous operations of infrastructure. And one of the things that we are interested in is understanding how we can use GenAI to build a more intelligent infrastructure. And there are multiple areas of work that Red Hat has put its effort in terms of open source components, open source tools, improving models. There is a lot of technology advancement that have happened recently. I think Anpu just recently explained a bunch of things. What we are seeing is in terms of how can we create better training of those models. What's the kind of data that we need? So Red Hat started a project called Open Data Hub. So Open Data Hub is a curated data, anonymized, that's available for anybody to use so that you can actually train your model sets based on that. It's actually taken off like crazy in terms of how number of companies, universities, different departments that are collaborating in that particular project. And Red Hat's actually one of the kickstarters of that particular project, right? So that's one area. The other area is, for me, it's about actually getting better observability and instrumentation that's in the infrastructure, which is server layer, network layer, data center, and then user and application layer, right? So when I get that kind of data, now what we can do is we can actually curate that particular data. Then you can provide different kinds of use the latest advancements around reinforcement learning, adaptive learning, and build better insights into what's going on, which will allow me to troubleshoot that particular infrastructure. And then by creating a closed loop model, it'll allow me to act or react based on what's going on. So the eventual goal is to create an autonomous operations model where the infrastructure is telling you where you need more capacity. The infrastructure is telling you where you have a problem and it's been isolated. The infrastructure, rather than us doing all of these things manually. And this doesn't happen without actually automation being the first step of that particular process. And most recently, I think literally 3 or 4 months ago, we announced something called Ansible Lightspeed. Ansible Lightspeed is using GenAI. So it's using what's at the back end it uses GenAI capability to actually generate automation playbooks based on your contextual environment. So if you point to your repo, to your Git repo, your infrastructure, tree, if you will, in terms of site information and capabilities, based on that particular context, it can actually create different kinds of automation playbooks for you. Compliance checks, configuration management, troubleshooting capability. That's what we just launched as a product in that capability. Now, of course, there's a lot more to be done, but we'll talk about it when we discuss the challenges of that.
Sure. Thank you, Azhar. Dr. Shailesh, if I could come to you. From a geo perspective, you had the data science team, been working extensively on artificial intelligence. You also have a partnership with NVIDIA. Could you tell us firstly, what is, I know that you have been building a lot of enterprise applications. How has things changed in the last 1 year? What does this partnership mean for Geo? And very importantly, when it comes to use cases and transforming that in native languages, how is it going to impact the end customer?
Thank you for the invitation. Good afternoon, everyone. So let me give a little bit background before I answer your question. So, this idea of GenAI did not start 10 years ago. It started 10,000 years ago. And when I say that, you have to understand the origin of how it all started, right? So, if you think of any civilization like the Indian civilization, the survival of a civilization depends on its ability to produce, consume, distribute knowledge, not only across space, but across time, across generations, right? And we started sharing knowledge with verbal memorization of the shlokas. Then we created script, we wrote it down. Then we had a printing press. And then we were able to not have one script, but millions of copies of that. Then the digital revolution came, internet came, we put everything on the internet. Then search engine came. And now GenAI came. So first is to look at this as a extension of what has been happening in the world of knowledge sharing and all that, right? Now we call it, when we worked at Google, we used to call it, the librarian of the world. Now the librarian has actually read all the books. So that is the big transition that has happened. Now it is not pointing you to the book based on your query, it is telling you the answer because it has read all the books. And that's a very big change. From an AI perspective, why this is a very big deal, I want us to understand that context, right? So if you think of AI, there are 5 levels of intelligence in my mind. So one is the ability to learn, the ability to understand, the ability to think, and the ability to create, and finally to be conscious of who we are. Now we have crossed the 4th stage of intelligence, the ability to create. Even if we look at our own children, when we teach them and they regurgitate, no big deal. But when they create a new music, when they create a new poem, when we create a new innovation, that is considered a very high form of intelligence. So I think now we have crossed the 4th layer of intelligence, and that's why it's a very big deal. Another perspective I'll give you, for the last 20 years, Google was dominant in the search engine market. And the only reason was because it was depending on the click feedback data that the world was providing. Very big transition that has happened in GenAI is now nobody needs feedback data from anybody, because the next word is already there in the document given the previous words. So you can always predict the next word. You don't need to depend on people to generate data to build a model. You already have the data, right? Every image pixel has a neighboring pixel already. Every word has a before and after word. Every music tone has a before and after tone. So the label data is now already there. This self-supervision is a very big change that has happened. And today, anybody can build a very complex foundation model because of this fundamental transition from needing external data to build a model versus internal data to build a model, right? That's a very big change. Now with that context, I want to talk a little bit about, one is the NVIDIA partnership we all heard. Now, as Geo transformed the data landscape in the country, right? Bringing down the cost of data was our first mission, and we succeeded in that. And now we are at number 1 in all that. The second big cost, the hurdle of AI transformation of the country is compute cost now, right? And if compute cost is very high, no matter how many great scientists and researchers we have all over IITs and everywhere, if the compute cost is high, however many startups we have, compute cost has to be brought down. Unless we bring that cost down, a lot of innovation will not happen. So the first reason for the partnership is to bring down the compute costs and democratize compute the way we have democratized data. That will make a very big difference in the entire ecosystem. And obviously on top of it, a lot of things have to happen. Now, in terms of application, I think what GenAI has done, it has opened up, especially for Indian context, a lot of opportunities, right? Our challenge is languages on one side of the matrix and domains on one side of the matrix. So if you think about agriculture domain in all languages, education domain in all languages, manufacturing domain in all languages, healthcare domain in all languages, if you imagine that matrix, how much potential work is now available to be done so that we can create LLMs for every language, cross every domain, and make that available, right? So farmers can use their LLM in whatever language they are comfortable with, and engineers can use their LLM to design and manufacture whatever they want to do. Telecom people can do their LLM to do their thing. So I think this has opened up a new form of knowledge access, right knowledge, without having to go to the 200 silos of data, because all of it is in one place. So that will really accelerate our ability to further create, new innovation and more knowledge. So that is a very big thing. And organizations like Bharat GPT and all are now working on, creating LLMs in many Indian languages is going to be a big national effort and cross all the domains. So I think that will really boost the economy in a very different way. I'll talk about more use cases in society later, but thank you.
Thank you. Although I will, maybe in the next time you'll cover the entire efficacy of the implementation of the model, but we can cover that. Pratibha, if I could come to you, you represent an organization like Bosch, which is not only into high-end enterprise applications, device, equipments, you also represent a service organization that is actually servicing not only your internal customers but your external clients. From a process optimization perspective, okay, what kind of changes are you seeing in the way you are delivering to your own internal customers with AI being more adopted? Are you also seeing some good transformational cases on the work that you're doing that you're taking to customers as well?
Yeah, thank you. It is Bosch, for example, comes in the category you mentioned in your research, which is a lot of investment and a lot of research. Considering the domains that Bosch worldwide, I'm not talking only as a service, but actually Bosch worldwide is involved in, with a lot of domains, mostly automotive, and then the rest of the domains. But two spectrums I can talk about, like you said, for the external, what we are offering for the external, while we do a lot of research for our internal applications and how we can be, in the context of responsible AI. This is very important for us, with autonomous driving, for example, going to be the next. So you wouldn't find too many information about it on the public network, because a lot of it is, a lot of research has to go for responsible AI. But two easy ones coming from the organization. I head the Bosch Service Solutions business in India, and we have developed the conversational AI. Of course, since you're in the services sector, this is the most easiest one to pick up, I guess, or I would say is imperative today, because no client is ready to talk to us unless they know that we can bring in such technologies and are not doing the age-old contact center kind of support. So, but we did it with a little difference, because again, like I said, Bosch is very, very careful about responsible AI, data security, information security. So what we have done is, for example, built our own conversational AI middle layer. So we don't take it from the outside world, we develop our own, but we partner for creating the knowledge source, of course, comes from our own work that we do and how we can train that model. And on the input side, the engine for doing this is what only the partnership that we do. Considering this, and over this middleware, we have developed a lot of applications. For example, of course, the simple contextual search, to agent assist, to sentiment analysis, topic conversation, which always improves the speed of reaction. But there is a lot of still debate, whether it is possible to give this kind of knowledge that it picks up directly to the end customers. But I think we will get there. What is important is, of course, the knowledge base that we have and how we train it, how we control it. The second, the other spectrum is a lot of investment has gone. In fact, we have an in-house startup which is developing solutions called like AI Shield, or what we call AI Guardian, which is on the regulation, or rather helping companies. It's a software solution, and this software kind of helps companies in two ways. One, a simple rule-based or standard AI or standard pitfalls of generative AI. It kind of checks with simple lines of code. Two, where we have this other solution where we can kind of code for organizations' policies, so that the more proprietary information is not leaked. So completely what we are talking today about, checking the input as well as the output and have a guardrail. So this kind of solutions are also being used, which we offer after using it well internally, is now being offered externally also.
Thank you. I'm very happy to hear that. And I'll take clue from what you said at the end, which is around AI Shield and the solution that you spoke about. Pranav, if I could come to you, you are an organization, you represent Accenture, that has been adopting AI to service your customers, recommending to your customers. One of the statistics that we have researched while talking to our clients is more than 15 to 20% of the new applications that are expected to get developed through AI. Okay, this is transforming the way software development is going to get re-envisioned. From your own perspective, because you focus on enterprise reinvention, business optimization, what are you seeing as real challenges at your clients where AI is being used, and what are some of your learnings from some of these experiences?
So thanks a lot for that question. I think already, I was hearing the statistic that about 40% of the code on GitHub is already AI generated. So I think it's only going to go up more and more. If we talk about some of the challenges, I think LLMs and the whole generative AI is very early in the journey. One way of thinking about it is that if you compare it to, let's say, Web 2, you are probably pre-Facebook, right? So that's how early you are in this revolution. I think there are very few clients which have right now taken a let's say a leap towards leveraging GenAI. Most of the people are in experimentation phase. However, there are a few clients which have actually been able to see that this is a fundamental shift. This is pushing the productivity frontier out. So if you think about a productivity frontier, which is for any cost, what is the value that you could deliver? What generative AI can now do is fundamentally push it out. For the same cost, you could generate, significantly more value. So there are a few examples of companies which have been able to internalize that, and that is where the boards of the companies have been able to set a very clear vision in terms of how they want to see this total enterprise reinvention leveraging GenAI, right? It's a very challenging task. There are lots of risk around GenAI that are still unpredictable. The technology itself is advancing so fast that all of the decisions around whether to build or buy may look very different. You make the decision today, in 3 months that build or buy decision could need to be revisited. So it's a fast changing space. There are lots of risk, but there will be advantage for the first movers which will be there. Yeah.
Thank you, Pranav. Milind, if I could come to you. I wanted to now, since I've covered the question on capability build.
Is there anything for me to answer now?
No, there are lots to answer, especially because you represent an organization that not only touches enterprise customers, but B2B2C as a domain, which is a very important domain to cover. And traditionally, a lot of what you do impacts customer behavior and experience. So generative AI has a very big role to play in that. And you probably were in the area of conversational AI much before some of these use cases and LLM models started getting advanced. So could you throw some light on what has changed for you when you're now having conversation with enterprise customers, number one, and some good use cases and also some practical challenges that you have seen, which we discussed to the extent you can share to our audience.
Yeah, thanks. You know, I always find it very difficult after pundits have spoken.
Yes.
A product marketer or a product guy comes and talks about generative AI is like an antithesis. But let me try and give a slightly
Would
different.
you want to give a context of first what you do and then?
I'll give a context. So I work with a company called Root Mobile, and we basically do a lot amount of work. So we help our brands and enterprises communicate to the consumer, right? And that communication could be one way, could be two way, could be multi-channel, could be omni-channel, whatever that is, right? So that means a lot of times a brand is talking to its consumer with plethora of degrees of intensity. It could be a marketing conversation, it could be a customer care conversation, it could be an engagement conversation, and so on and so forth, right? Coming back to generative AI, so I'll take a leaf out of him and let me build a context so that people are able to pick up the use case. See, Gutenberg Press democratized knowledge. What was available with minds of few, books of few, became available for billions of people, right? Internet democratized brands, which means I learned MBA way back, I don't know, 20 years ago in Bajaj, and the answer there was, our professors used to teach us, Levi's was an urban brand and Killer was a rural brand, right? Internet democratized that. There is no urban rural brand anymore. A rural consumer is as aspirational for Levi's as what he is today, right? I believe, and I don't know if this is original point of thought or said by someone, but I believe generative AI democratizes time, okay? There is no application in the human world which has democratized and unlocked time for an individual, right? We often talk of cost optimizations and people reductions and so on and so forth, right? But if you look at generative AI, basically what I'm doing is I'm training my enterprises to use tools and technology and unlock time out of system, unlock time out of people. If a man can do a work in 8 hours, can I make him do it in 8 minutes and unlock 10 hours, 52 minutes for him so that he can use that time somewhere else productively, right? One way to look at it is to say, there'll be a job loss because machines will take over. But I dream of a day when the panel 20 years down the line, I'll be sitting with a robot plus a AI generative guy and he'll be conversing with me, and I would love to live a life to see that in the world, right? As a product guy. Democratization of time has multiple elements to it, right? It has an element around compute, it has an element about, he touched about it saying, how do you really bring productivity? But all the loads of this conversation lead to one and only one point, which is how am I unlocking time in the system? Because that's the only finite 24 hours you have in anybody's life. There is, everything else is infinite, this is the only finite time, right? Now, when I look that as a problem, and I give you a marketing use case now. The holy grail of marketing was Unilever serves billion consumers, almost all billion consumers as a mobile phone today. Can every text which reaches their hand be unique, right? It's impossible to do without huge computes on it. Can I show every image? Can I do personalized advertising, right? Can I do personalized content creation, which is, and that personalized conversation is not just saying, hey Milan, because hey Milan can easily come with hey asterisk in your code and it will just come at, right? It's just matter. But can I really bring contextualization and personalization to that level, right? Customer care. And I was just talking to Azhar before. 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, we did a customer care conversation between a voice bot and a consumer. And if you hear that conversation, you would not know that the other person talking is a machine. it was seamless. It was responding to with all the ers and ums and the human interface and saying, okay, I'm at the curb. Okay, curb is not there. Then near your thing, this is a place where you could potentially go and pick up. And it was a robo which was doing that. And it was all backed by LLM models behind, right? So the second use case that we have seen is customer care, conversations, and so on and so forth, right? The third thing which I find, which is, and which I'll come to the part of kind of negativity of that part is, we have stopped doing tests for interviews because all the tests are now ChatGPT supported. To an extent that I have also experienced in appraisals, people are putting all the KPIs and ChatGPT and doing that across. So our appraisals have also become very, very standardized, right? So it's very difficult to now even judge people as to what work they're doing, right? And the last point I would want to say is that I think somewhere down the line there is a need for us to understand that this technology, whether we like it or not, will come. But how do we need to make it responsible, right? And I've been saying this for donkey's years, perhaps, and we can take leapfrog as a country in doing that, which is we are perhaps the only country in the world which needs a liftman and the lift at the same time, right? There's no country in the world which needs to do that. We are the only country. And when that happens, you can really kick innovation a big way. Just to give you a stats, because everyone is a fan of stats, every third out of the fourth startup today in India talks generative AI, right? So I think, and we can give a lot to the world of this lift and the liftman world, which is responsible, ethical AI, which does not kill employments and builds around it. And me and my team loves building solutions around it.
Excellent. I'll probably cover the last part of what you said around biasness. You covered hallucination, and there are and everybody is talking about responsible AI. Not many regulations around that. It's still governed by guiding principles that an organization or the hyperscalers have started introducing. So let me first try to conclude this, and then we'll probably open it up to the audience on if you were to give one recommendation on how do we improve adoption of AI, or if you were to give any recommendation on regulating AI, what would that be? Maybe Azhar, I can start with you.
Thank you. Before I answer your question, I'm going to say something very quick. I did cheat. What I did was I took your questions that you sent us and fed it to ChatGPT. And
I hope you got.
And I have the answers. And actually, it's right here on my phone screen. The most interesting thing about that.
Can I just ask a trivia to this audience? Is there anyone who has not used ChatGPT? Is there anyone? Yeah. Anyone. So that actually answers the question on everybody is using it.
The screen is
what
open.
you use it for is very different.
So,
yeah.
no,
but that's still 3.5, right?
But this is 3.5, of course. But the screen is open. But the point I'm trying to make is not that. The point I'm trying to make is, despite the fact that it's such sophisticated, despite the fact that the language model was developed and it answered all the questions that you had in a very structured way, not a single answer in that matched anything, all of us, in what we said here on the panel. And that was actually my observation. So there was something to be said about where that model still is. And I think you actually said it very well. It is actually pre-Facebook or whatever, right? I thought that was very, very revealing. Now, to come back to your questions, pardon me for actually going in a roundabout way. I think what we really need is a proper governance framework. That governance framework is incredibly important to ensure you put the right guardrails around different components. And we need it at all different levels. How do you sandbox it? One of the things that I've been thinking and talking about in multiple conversations with people is, you can generate anything, you can build a artificial intelligence machine that can provide you answers to a lot of very interesting and very tough questions. But those questions and answers remain where they are unless you act upon them. And I think if you separate the line between the generative part and the action part, there is a guardrail that you can actually propose to make that happen. So I think one conversation that you said was human in the loop. I love that idea of human in the loop, and how you can do that, how you can actually put some guardrails and frameworks and remove that bias or remove those components, etc.
The only question is whether it will be self-regulated or you need an external regulation. But Pranav, your thoughts. And
Yeah.
if I can request all panelists to keep it
Yeah,
brief
I'll
because
keep
we
it
are
30
running short.
less than 30 seconds. I think we don't need regulation. All laws, at personal opinion, all laws required, which is basically if you're causing embodied harm, they all exist. I would recommend everyone to go and have a look at this Bill Gurley talk at the All In Summit. Regulation has repeatedly been shown to lead to regulatory capture, and that's my personal opinion. I think we don't need regulation. All the laws exist. If you cause harm, you're liable for it. So it's a tool like anything else. Personal opinion.
Sure. 1-0. I'm just counting the votes.
Yeah, I think, yeah, to a certain extent, what he says makes sense, because the minute you put a regulation, somebody wants to break it, put a rule and somebody wants to break it. But I think it's more responsible of companies who are looking. I mean, ChatGPT is fun. Maybe all of us have used it for fun, for checking or something. But if it comes to serious implementation, I think companies can look at three important things, at least in my opinion, or what I have learned from my the researchers who are doing it in Bosch. Three things that we pay a lot of attention, I understand, is information security, data protection. This must be first checked. The second is explainable AI, means to say, can you trust the source in which it has come, the hallucinations, these things, not just any generic knowledge source or LLM, but actually can you explain how you got this somehow, whether it is a human who does it or another LLM, anything is possible. But yeah, so that. And the third one, I think, is protection of intellectual property. I think this is very, very important. If, I mean, if a regulation comes, I think it will also come in these areas only. But if companies or organizations pay attention to this, rather than saying, let me promote it for the sake of being very cool or next gen, I think there will be a lot of benefits.
Sure. Yeah.
See, regulation and responsible AI are two very different paradigms. Responsible AI,
Absolutely.
big proponents of it. Companies
Yeah, guiding
need to
principles.
be responsible
Yeah.
for that, right?
Sure.
Regulation is a different
Sure.
question.
So,
I think it's 2-1. She
and
wants
and
regulation.
if you don't mind repeating the question.
No, are there any specific regulations, any recommendations that you might have for better adoption or more to avoid bias?
So three things I would say. One is capability building across all.
Yes.
Industry, people, training, this, that, another. Second is lack of better word, I'm using the word regulation, which is self-regulation, which is can you have a overarching guidance of how people should behave responsibly. And the third element is to be, and this, I'm an absolutist on this front, whatever it is, 5 years down the line, I don't want to have a scenario that this is AI university conversation. Okay.
Sure.
AI university conversation, right? You hear a lot of WhatsApp university conversations. Okay, I don't want to get this into 5 years down the line. We are saying, oh, this is AI university
Technically,
conversation.
that has already started.
But that's it, because that will take your capability of this, like,
Sure.
it's like a race to down.
Sure,
Yeah.
depth over breadth. Yeah. Shailesh.
Yeah. So I'll take a different take on this. So, whenever at Google we used to have interviews, the first answer is supposed to be a brute force answer. And then you think about it and say what is wrong with it, and then you correct your answer, right? That's how a good interview is. And I think AI is evolving in the same way. The first answer that we have come up with to generation is a brute force answer. And when I say brute force answer, you all understand that today the way we practice deep learning, whether it is image understanding, language understanding, or generation, is actually brute force AI. Just throw a lot of data, a lot of parameters, a lot of compute, a very beautiful algorithm, run it for months, pay $1 billion, and something nice will come out. That is called brute force AI. Now let me tell you what version 2 of this will look like. The second answer of LLM will look like. What is wrong with it? We all love it, but there's something wrong with it. If you think about language degree of freedom and knowledge degree of freedom, right? Language degree of freedom is how many ways can you say the same thing. Knowledge degree of freedom is how many things can you say, right? So for example, if I say Delhi is the capital of India, the knowledge is also correct, the language is also correct. But if I say Paris is the capital of India, language is correct, knowledge is not correct. And if I say banana is the capital of India, both language is not correct and knowledge is also not correct. Now what LLM is doing today is not LLM, it is actually language plus knowledge model. That means it has memorized not only how to say, but also what to say. Now think about it, we all learn language up to a certain age, then our language doesn't improve, our knowledge continues to improve. Now what happens after 2021 knowledge? Every month, every week, it has to upgrade the knowledge. But the problem is language plus knowledge is learned jointly in LLMs today. And that's a very big problem. It causes hallucination and many other problems. One of the big next innovation will be separation of language and knowledge. So that language models, truly language models will mature and saturate in every language. And knowledge will continue to grow, whether it is structured knowledge, personal knowledge, private knowledge, public knowledge, in a different format. And when we say a sentence, we combine the two towards the end. We say, this is how I want to say it, and this is what I want to say. Together becomes the language generation. So I think we have built a language cross knowledge model. That is why it is so large and so compute intensive. The next big innovation will be separation of the two. And you will suddenly see that knowledge part we can control. This is what you need to say, and this is how you need to say it, are going to be merging later, and there will be no room for hallucination after that. So I think that's going to be the next big evolution of LLM in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think my view is, I think we certainly need some guardrails and maybe some regulation. I'll give you two examples. I think one she talked about IP protection. So if LLM eats up a lot of data from here and there, and it also captures some copyrighted or intellectual property stuff, then how do you solve this? So for this some kind of regulation is required. Secondly, if there is a mistake generated by a generative AI engine, then who do you held accountable for? Whom will you jail? So let's say you make a mistake, we know you did it, right? So you will get in trouble. But if generative AI does it, then what do you do? So that's I think a big question, and probably some kind of regulation or some kind of solution is required for that. Yeah.
Sure. So thank you. I think we have run out of time, but I just wanted to conclude by saying, okay, my verdict or my point of view on this is, we certainly need some guardrails because everything looks right until somebody makes an error and you need to find someone. So you can start with self-regulation, be responsible in all models that are adopted, start incorporating that governance in it. And if everything goes right, we may still go with the self-regulated mode until data privacy bill comes in. Okay, thank you very much, and it's been an honor.
For today's session. This session will be moderated by Sumantra, who is the partner for KPMG India. A bit of introduction there for Sumantra. Sumantra is the conceptualizer and founder of the innovation and intellectual property advisory services in KPMG India and is currently leading the practice. He has been recognized by IAM Strategy 300 as a top IP strategist in 2017 and 2018. Welcome, Sumantra. Welcome all the panelists.
I would assume that there would be a lot of repetitions of the topics that would have been discussed in the earlier session. But the best part is that because we have now a new set of panelists, so we are likely to see a different perspective to each of those pointers, right? And now, generative AI, AI has been there for long, right? So AI is not something new to any of us. The latest buzz that we have seen around generative AI, and we have seen specifically after the ChatGPT initiation, where it has become a buzzword for everybody, right? So there are a lot of optimism around GenAI. There is a lot of what you call apprehensions about what it will do to the job market, what it will do to the environment. Is GenAI going to replace human individuals in terms of the work being performed? And as we see that there are a lot of use cases that organizations are working towards day in and day out, trying to see that how this tool can actually enable us and increase the productivity of organizations, right? And not only organizations, it can be for individuals also, it can be for code writers, it can be for content creators, it can be for anyone, right? So my first question will be to Abhay, that Abhay, I would want that maybe if you can take a minute or so to just talk through the audience in terms of what Gen AI is, right? And what are the basic construct, what are we looking at? Because I'm sure that in this audience, we have people who are probably an expert in Gen AI and people who just have heard the term ChatGPT or OpenAI. So just to bring all of us on the same page, Abhay, if you can just maybe give us some context.
Thanks, Sumantra. So I'll talk about a few things, few facts that have happened over the course of last 6-7 months, which will give you the kind of flavor that artificial intelligence has created in the market, right? So on one day, Microsoft and NVIDIA, they gained 192 billion in stock price. Can you beat it? The NASDAQ index during the course of first 6 months grew 32% just because there were a few companies which were working on AI, and that started happening. This kind of a, what do I call, huge interest in AI, how did it happen suddenly? AI is not new, as Mantra mentioned. The first starting point of AI was as old as 1936. None of us were born at that point in time. And this goes to Alan Turing's invention of machines and how machines can be made intelligent, to the extent that today, Alan Turing's methodology is the test of how close a machine is mimicking human brain. So it dates back to that level. But from whatever we understand, McCarthy being, somewhere around 1956, this again got revived, and that's kind of assumed as the time when AI was born, or like AI started getting adopted. We don't realize it, but most of us have been using AI capabilities in some form or the other in our daily lives. Simplest of all example, most of us must be using Alexa or Google Mini or things like that. How do they work? How do you think they work? How are they able to synthesize your speech and do the action that you are asking them to do? It's all nothing but AI. But what changed? As I said, that the companies who are working on AI suddenly gain this kind of evaluation. The entire NASDAQ index goes crazy about it. And today, if you speak about any company, they want to do AI. What has changed? Fundamentally, the difference that has happened was most of the AI things that used to happen in the past were action oriented. They would analyze a few things and generate a certain action based on whatever they are analyzing, and then they are making it happen. The difference that has happened in the recent past is with generative AI. Now, what does generative AI do fundamentally? Different from the earlier versions of the AI, which were mostly action oriented. This is able to generate content. It is creativity. Mankind prides itself for only one thing, and that is creativity. Now you have a challenger to that mankind, that whatever you can create an art, generative AI can create an art. You can create an article, generative AI can create an article. You can create an image, generative AI can create an image. And therefore it is the very fundamental thing, which is creativity in human beings, which is getting challenged. And therefore this is creating a lot of hype and a lot of it has kind of become a buzzword when we talk about generative AI. I hope we all get to the page that what exactly is the difference on what we have been using versus what's new that we are getting into. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhay. Very relevant point. So my next question is to Somer. Somer, so AI has been around, as Abhay was telling, for some time, right? Why this sudden change, and in terms of everybody running, and if you look at the newspaper, I see that maybe I think most of the sections of the newspapers are taken by AI. And more or less all organizations across the world are investing in this technology, right? Be it generative or predictive AI. So what has changed suddenly that everybody is just running after this?
Thanks, Sumantra, for the question. At Intel, we use a term called technology inflection point, started by our revered founder, Andy Grove, right? I think there are three factors that are affecting this conversation. Number one is COVID has primed us to accelerate the use of technology. So the inhibitions we had for using technology over COVID has kind of reduced, number one, right? Second, I think the technology and infrastructure, right? I think it was getting ripe to reflect human interactions. Like, for example, artificial intelligence, the word intelligence makes more sense. But if you look at you, me, or anybody else, if you look at me, you, me, or anybody else, the interaction is multimodal in the sense you have speech, text, video, take it, right? Now, when you look at this multimodal conversation, today, if you look at the advancements in compute, the advancements in network, the advancements in security, within a reliable latency, what have you, you're able to give that multimodal experience back to the customer, right? Again, we have to use a hybrid AI approach to do that, all that great, but technology was ready to do that. Third, when you have the people are primed, the technology existing, you need a killer application. And let's not be confused, ChatGPT was a killer application that did happen. So I think the three things that I bring it together is timing, the availability of infrastructure to do that, and last, the killer application, which is ChatGPT. I think all three came together to make it say, hey, it actually mimics what a human being can do. And that's kind of my personal point of view on this. Sure.
Thanks, Somer. So I'll now call upon Hardeep. Hardeep, so we know that this is there, and I'll come in a bit in terms of to understand also at an organization level all of you are doing to kind of embed generative AI to kind of increase the efficiency of the businesses. But how do you think that this application can be scaled up, and the application of GenAI can be scaled up, and it can be made more pervasive? And do you also think that are there any barriers to this ambition?
So in terms of making it more pervasive, first thing is you have to figure out where it is being used. So whether it is, what are your end devices? So it could be your smartphone, it could be your car, it could be your XR device, it could be your laptop, PC, uh, uh, IoT device. You could have a range of devices. Now, in terms of making it more accessible, once you have it on the device, there are two ways to do it. One, you could send all the data to the cloud and then come back with the response. The other element would be that you have model running locally, and you could use what we think is a hybrid AI approach, where there are various mixes and matches. You have to think about something similar to a mainframe and a thin client moving to cloud and an edge client, right? So from in terms of the trends, what you will see is, one, I think the challenges are in terms of cost. The cost of generative AI query is probably around 10 times the cost of a regular search. So over a period of time, what you will see, it is prohibitively more expensive to support a generative AI query, right? So what you have to do is figure out how you can run that optimally. So in terms of doing that, it's a combination of running some queries locally, which will be a smaller, let's say, LLM models, which could run on device. And second could be, how do you offload it, which specific things you offload. So you will have arbiter in the device itself, which will figure out that, okay, this can be run locally, and this I have to offload to the device. Or the other model could be, you could run few functions on the device, other functions could be run always on the cloud. The very simple example will be that I could run a voice to text, which could be fed locally because I have voice recognition based LLM running on the device, and that query could go to the cloud and come back, and then I could do text to speech as well. So that's the other element. And then in terms of putting it all together, you will see two trends. One, the LLMs by themselves are becoming bigger and bigger. If I have to kind of give you a trend, you had GPT-1, which was around 170 million parameters, GPT-2, I think a few billion parameters, GPT-3, I think around 70 billion parameters, going to GPT-4, which is estimated to be around 1.8 trillion parameters. So models are becoming increasingly large. That's one trend. But the other trend is the foundational model, the people who generate foundational models, they are also trying to make the model smaller as well. So you have like Llama 2, you have a model, 3 versions of the model, if I can use that word. So you have 7 billion parameters, you have 13 billion parameters, and you have 70 billion parameters. So you can easily, and we announced a couple of chipsets just 2 days back. You could run around 10 billion or 13 billion, whether it's a laptop or a PC, 10 billion or 13 billion parameters locally on the device. So going forward, as you make it more accessible, you could also make it more available as well. And then from there, cost goes down, energy goes down, you have better privacy, you have better security. One of the reasons why organizations, I think we don't encourage right now some of these unless we have a corporate supported thing, the data does not go out of the corporation, right? So there are privacy concerns around that, there are security concerns around that. So local models in conjunction with cloud would be a good combination to address some of that, and then you can do personalization on top.
Sure. So thanks, Hardeep. Now I'll move to Rohit and then to Vikas. Maybe if you are able to give us a few use cases that you as an organization are trying with GenAI, and are you seeing, because I think in one of the recent TMT forums only, the thing which I heard was that though they are being kind of leveraged by organizations, are you seeing or have you seen where there is a good amount of benefit that you are getting by leveraging these models from an operational standpoint?
Sure. So I represent Airtel here. Airtel has around 350 million plus users, right? And an organization with that kind of a user base spreading across the country, right, with different languages, right? Plus Airtel being the company, right, that adopts new technology, right, be it 5G or be it GenAI, right? So the very first use case that we are actually exploring is how GenAI can help in customer service, right? We were already doing conversational AI, we were already doing intent detection and all those things in our chatbots. But now the next thing is generative AI, right? So the customer interactions that happens on our call centers, right? How we can basically create summaries of those interactions, right? And how those summaries can actually be fed back to the original knowledge base, and so that the second customer that comes, right, that his query can be answered through the ever-evolving knowledge base, right? The other thing in customer services, how our chatbot can answer customer query, right, without actually you have to create journey. So what happens in chatbot, for every identified journey, right, there is someone who creates the journey in the backend, right? But with generative AI, right, you don't need to create any journeys, right? Specifically, this is a recharge journey, this is this journey, right? You just provide your knowledge base and the chatbot will be able to answer majority of your questions, right? This actually helps our agents, right, with a lot of reduced load. The second thing that we are actually exploring is that for an organization with huge size, right, there are a lot of documents, right, content within the organization, right, contracts, right. How can we make internal basically knowledge sharing more efficient, right? So something like conversational search. So all the policies, documents, right, we have done a project wherein we have trained our large language model, right, on our knowledge base, so that employees can access internal information, right, in a much more convenient way and a easier way, right? Obviously taking care of the security, etc., right? No content should go outside your organization, right? That's the first principle. Besides that, right, I represent engineering, right? So there are developers in the organization, right? And there are tools that like Microsoft has come up, right? Or Google or maybe Amazon, right? Code Whisperer, Copilot, right? So we are also exploring, right, some POCs around those tools, right? How those tools can help improve developer efficiency. One of the major drawbacks is obviously these tools cannot basically generate the entire code, right? It cannot replace a developer, right? But few easy tasks like some utility functions or generating test cases from your code, right, that can be easily done by Copilot. The third area, right, where as an organization we are not directly involved, but I think because the ecosystem of generative AI is evolving, right, it will be helpful to us. So for example, Microsoft Outlook 365, I think they are coming up with, you can auto-generate an email, right, that will eventually help employee productivity, or let's say Bing search, right, it also has ChatGPT inbuilt, right? So ultimately it will also help. But at an organization, at Airtel level, right, we are very concerned on the security aspects, right? So no matter how easy it is available on cloud, right, still I think the world is evolving, and we have to be very, very concerned on the data not being going out of the organization, right? So that's my take.
So basically, Gen AI is something which I think most of the organizations are using to enhance the customer experience or the user experience, right? I think that's one pretty loud use case that we see across various domains, right? Flipping the same question to you, because at TCS, I'm sure that you are doing for your own setup as well as for a lot of clients that you serve. A lot of these use cases must be coming. So what kind of disruptive trends are you seeing in terms of, from a usage perspective, that people are looking at?
Yeah, sure. Am I audible? Yeah, so in TCS, I work with the Network Solution and Services Unit, and TCS being a large organization, the various experiments happening using GenAI at various industry vertical, be it life sciences, be it retail, banking, and all of that. But right now, I'll just talk more from telecom network point of view. And this, when this GenAI came in and we all of us set that, what we can do for the customers. And at the same time, customers starts, asking us that, can you suggest us? So there are three typical things which we are looking at, and that comes with a bit of a thinking that GenAI has primarily made unstructured data, working on unstructured data very easy. So for example, the AI was everywhere in our life, but earlier it was in the hand of the people like Amazon, Google. So they were selling you shampoos or hair conditioner with AI. Now it is the turn where people can do a lot of creativity. So the power has come to the masses. That's one thing which has come through the Gen AI in terms of the creation, in terms of the putting it different business value proposition. Now come to the network. We look at that where exactly unstructured data is, because structured data side we have been doing a lot of things. We are pretty mature in our cognitive network operations, doing predictions, correlations and all. Now we found three areas very critical. One is if you look at the complete network rollout cycle, and that's where you capture a lot of images, videos from your field or from sites where all these wireless antennas, everything is there, and you have to regularly, not only installing, but you have to regularly monitor those. So that's where you capture images and all. So that is one area we are working on generative AI to generate some ideal site locations, kind of thing. If I have a FDD antenna, TD antenna, I have a given marketplace, what can be an ideal scenario? Now, second thing, there is a lot of code generation which happens for the site integration. That's another area we want to integrate sites. So there is one site come, 10 sites around it, neighboring site, how we can integrate, how we can generate the code. Now for us, TCS is the challenge or opportunity is that we are a network agnostic player. So for Ericsson or for Nokia, it might be easy because that's their patented technology, they can do it. But when I prepare a solution for my client, I have to look at that, it has to be network agnostic. That's second. And then the third area is more into the B2B space. Again, B2B, there are 2-3 things internally B2B. I'll just talk a bit technical, in the B2B network. So if you're managing, if Airtel is managing a B2B network or Idea managing or Geo managing, you manage in two ways. One place you will be managing some customer devices, giving the connectivity, and some place you will be managing your devices for customer connectivity as well as giving connectivity to them. Now, that's where, if you look at L3 level, when you do some troubleshooting at the devices, at the protocol, at the configuration, your tasks become quite cumbersome, and then you might have seen certain outages going like 4 hours, 8 hours or something. So how can we use generative AI to create some customized script using or reading those hundreds of manuals which are there because of the network, different generation of the network or different network providers, something like Cisco or a Juniper of the world or something. So that's another area. And then in the B2B, when you give them an interface to manage their own network, how can you give them a power to generate some dashboards on their own, some queries on their own? And that's where the power of generation of generative AI comes handy. So these are the 3-4 areas. But the thing is that everyone and Hardeep talk very correctly that in terms of we are looking at parameters, because it's not easy to GenAI as a buzzword looks very easy, ChatGPT looks very easy, but when it comes to enterprise adoption, there has to be ROI in place. So you do some investment, what will be the ROI? That is the because it is very energy consuming, it is very resource consuming, all of those things. So it's not going to happen in 6 months. It's an iterative journey, it's an evolutionary journey, and we are quite hopeful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vikas. My next question is to Kishore, and I will move to a little different context. So all these generative AIs are built on large language models, right? LLMs. Now, the way these LLMs are trained, do you think that they become an expert in a particular domain, or they remain generalist? Now, my I'll also put this question in another way, that means organizations do rely or sometimes on the data that is being generated by these models, right? Now, is it something that you can close your eyes and rely upon, or there are risks associated with it, and how do you kind of address those from an organization standpoint?
Okay, so there are two questions. I mean, I'll first answer the second one. So any response that you get from a LLM or generative AI is it has its own inherent risks. There is hallucinations, there are wrong answers, and it actually gives it very confidently, or the language that it uses appears to, I mean, when you try and read it, it has reason in it, but the underlying logic is flawed. So that is one of the reasons why you cannot actually rely on the responses that LLM gives without any expert evaluating it. So that is one of the reasons why probably in many of the fields the LLM's adoption is not scaling so well. So the thing that we have to actually try and do to not make this happen is try and use this LLMs for the mundane kind of tasks that you actually can automate. So where the organization's expertise can actually check for the veracity, for the correctness of the output that it is giving. Beyond that, if you actually, I have no knowledge in agriculture. No, if I want to start, doing agriculture with the help of LLM, understanding that it's an expert, so I'll get nowhere. So I first have to know what kind of questions to ask. The second thing that I need to know is to be able to evaluate if the answers that it has given are right or not. So that is where the problem with LLMs is. Generally, because of the way the LLMs are trained, I mean, the second question that, the first question that we're trying to answer is there no place for experts? I mean, because LLMs are able to generate everything and anything, are creative in their own ways, is there no need for human experts? So the thing that happens generally in the training of LLMs is that they become a average expert in their field of training. So if an LLM is trained in medicine, it actually becomes an average doctor. But for anything that is beyond average, if you want the field to be pushed through, push the horizons of the field, LLMs cannot actually help you. So basically, there is a human component always ever existing in the LLM world. I mean, LLMs can actually be the average expert, like I've said, and actually help you be the assistant, doing all the mundane tasks for you, but then they can never turn out to be the real expert. The real expertise will always reside with the humans.
Very right. At least at this point of time. We don't know what, yeah.
So I have an opinion on that, but.
I'd like to recollect one example of what Kishore just said. I don't know how many of you read, but ChatGPT was asked to take IIT entrance exam. Did you read that? The result? I mean, any one of you? So over a period of last so many years of IIT entrance exam, ChatGPT was asked to write that exam, and the scoring was good, but it did not get selected. So that tells you what is the level that we have today, or how much we can rely, or how much we can work on that.
Absolutely. You had a point of view, right? You said.
Yes, so basically the way large language models work today, I mean, it's my version of understanding of how they work. So the logic and the knowledge are clubbed into the same model. The day you can actually move them out, the logic needs to be separated out from logic. That is when, essentially what you're saying, the hallucinations will reduce because you have full control on the knowledge. Knowledge cannot be, okay, LLMs are stochastic, as in they're probabilistic models, they're not deterministic. If you have a language, if you move out language and, logic and knowledge being deterministic, logic being stochastic, you can actually create models which do not hallucinate. I mean, I don't know if that's possible or not with the way we are, the current training methodologies, but that's the direction I think. I think there will be a V2 of GenAI where, these kind of hallucinations do not exist, where there is at least some kind of determinism in the output that it gives. Point number one. The second thing that we also need to understand is, if you have to push additional knowledge into an existing LLM, you have multiple ways, fine tuning, you have RAG methods and all. But that's not the way human actually works. If today I do not know that Delhi is the capital of India, and I'm told Delhi is the capital of India, I don't need it to be reiterated 20 times in my training data, things like that. So I know what is for a fact and what is not a fact, and I know how to ingest that data into my mind. So that is something that is actually missing. The day we separate out logic and knowledge, the knowledge can actually be improved on the fly every day. I mean, we won't start to have these limitations of Jan 2022. So the language keeps, has its own iteration path. The logic or the analysis of that knowledge or the output of that knowledge using the logic, that has its own evolution. So both of them together can actually give a beautiful output. So wait for that day, hopefully sooner.
Yeah, I had a quick comment as well. I think the key here is the training data. I think so. One of the things you have to do is to have good quality training data, and there are a lot of challenges around it to get good quality training data. So, for example, so that's one part of it. The other part of it is that you have to have domain-specific models. I think even in propagating it, you have to have domain-specific models. So if you are doing a health-specific AI, in that case, you could train it on a health-specific data set, right? But then you have to be a hospital, you have to be a doctor to have access to that kind of data. And once you have that, then the quality, if you're trying to do a generic LLM, you will get middle of the road, like you said, answer. But if you get access to that good quality data, then you make it a lot more relevant. And the other component I think he was talking about is on a given day, just output will be average if you feed the average data set. But a human plus the generative AI, that will increase the value tremendously. So you have to look at it as a combination rather than two separate independent elements.
Again, like to give an example of what both of them said. You would remember that computers play chess, right? That's exactly a similar thing what happened. And computer playing chess was able to beat Garry Kasparov. Now you can understand what exactly Hardeep said just now or before that Kishore said. If it is domain specific, if it is trained properly on a specific task, it can be wonderful. Like, I mean, it was trained specifically for chess, it had all the data sets for chess, and it was able to beat Garry Kasparov. But when you are asking ChatGPT to write an IIT exam, which is like, I mean, covering a wide area of things, and it is trained for wide area of stuff, the performance will be average itself. So you get the perspective in terms of examples is what I wanted to.
Let me ground this a little bit, if I could. I mean, there's definitely a lot of interest in Gen AI, what LLMs could do, the flavor of the month, right? But really to be sustainable, and if you look about some of the things Rohit said, I think there are three or four areas that we really need to be very sure about, right? One area is the privacy security concern, right? And we call it three laws. Law of physics, are you able to send it back and get it back? Law of the land, sovereignty, what have you, and you also got law of economics, the cost, right? So there's a lot, and Hardeep touched upon it, he talked about hybrid AI, you would probably move towards a model where whether it is the computational or the hardware capabilities or stack capabilities, or it becomes the LLM changes. There are a lot of organizations that are looking at narrow transformer models, what have you, so that you run more and more of that within the enterprise, meeting the security concerns, and then just sending it over for the training and getting me back. That's kind of the whole hybrid AI, the privacy security conversation, number one, right? The second conversation, people are, for those who are really into this domain like the panel is, look at the computational power requirements of any of these organizations. You're talking about kilowatts of power per system. From physics, it is infeasible, right? You'll get to a situation where you are not sustainable at all. The traditional system for those who are into data centers will talk about air cooling, okay? But air cooling in this environment when each of them is 10 kilowatts of power, just not possible, right? So you really need to be thinking about how fast or how aggressive is it, the improvements with cooling technologies or with alternatives, even in the context of the hardware itself or the software capabilities itself, so you can make that really work in an environmental, sustainable, friendly way, number two. Third thing is, as if I can talk to my friend, he's talking about scholastic, deterministic, and we wanted to move fast, right? You wanted to move fast. It needs to be in a way space that it's federated, it is taking the latest. But as an organization, right, I'd always want to be able to take the latest data, the latest capabilities, and get the latest output out of it, which means there's no other choice but to be open about it. You know, you really have to embrace an open ecosystem so that you're able to capture the conversation, use the hybrid AI approach as my colleague, Hardeep talked about, and then really look about the overall cost, because no enterprise, Rohit may differ, but no organization will implement a solution that is cost prohibitive. So I think taking cost, being open, looking at and private security as a primary driver, and then being able to work collaboratively as a people, country, set of organizations, I think is what could make this feasible. So that would be my request to the panel in the audience, because it's good to be on a hype of LLM, but we really need to see how to make it sustainable and work as we go forward. Sorry for butting in, but I just want to ground it in where it used to be.
So do Rohit differ in terms of the point that?
No, I agree. Actually, so Airtel, right? If I actually tell you, even till right now, right, we understand, yes, there will be increased productivity with generative AI, right? But actually, we haven't seen that happening in the organization yet,
True.
right? The future looks very, very promising, right? We are investing as a company a lot, right? But still, I think that we are still few months or years away, right, where we actually see that thing changing. It will change the world, right?
We are all in the journey as of now.
Absolutely.
That's what I can say. So my next question is to Abhay. Abhay, see, one is what we are talking about so far is the benefits of Gen AI, but we all know that we have already started seeing the misuse of Gen AI as well, right? So how do we kind of, as organization or as say regulatory bodies, ensure that there is a proper control in place, right? Maybe at a micro level or at a macro level, to ensure that the people are safeguarded, right, at the end of the day.
So if we look at web, it has been there for ages. There are plenty of, mostly it is being used for positive outcomes, but then there is dark web, and there is a huge amount of nuisance that is created by that as well. So every new technology that comes into play will have pros and cons, will have positives and negatives. That's bound to happen. World over, regulatory bodies are still contemplating as to how do we try and control the negative aspects of it. But organizations who are trying to build products out of AI, they are trying to do, inherently also we have to make sure that there are certain things in AI which can result into wrong things, like biases, hallucinations that he talked about, like inadequate trainings resulting into wrong outcomes kind of stuff. So currently what is happening is most of the organizations, like I come from Nokia. Nokia works a lot on how can we improve network performances and anomaly detections and other things using AI. But then what are the kind of restrictions that we are trying to put in place for the way it can be taken care of? There is a very common saying, right? Man is known by the company he keeps. That's exactly true for AI. It totally depends on the kind of data sets that it is being exposed to. If the data set is of a certain type, the entire generated outcome will be biased to a certain outcome. Now, therefore, it is absolutely critical that when the generative AI is being exposed, it needs to go through various kinds of data sets, as much variety as possible. If that doesn't happen, you are sitting at a time bomb. That's one big problem. The other big problem that that the organizations who are working on this need to take care about is the amount of training that is given to that particular thing. And it's not a cheap thing. He talked about the kind of cost. I'll give you a simple example of what is the level of costing that we are talking about. GPT-3, it took 1024 GPUs, I'm not talking CPUs, GPUs working for 34 days in order to create that kind of a training for GPT-3. You can understand. And the cost involved in doing this was close to about $5 million. So you can understand the amount of effort, cost, and compute power that is required in order to do this. The problem is everybody tries to take a shortcut when it comes to the cost, and therefore they won't adequately train it, and that would result in a catastrophe as well. So these are certain measures which the organizations who are working on it have to put in place. One, to remove the biases, which is very, very critical. Two, to invest sufficiently enough not to undertrain a person, undertrain the chat GPT and undertrain whatever AI outcome that you are generating and put it into the market for use. It will be catastrophic. But banning it, restricting it, that's not going to happen. We all know. There will be dark sides of it for sure. There are deep fakes which you can see in the markets already coming in, and they are very, very detrimental. But maybe with passage of time, regulations may come which will be slightly helpful. But today, nobody has a clue other than what the people who are working on it, they have to be ethical and they have to be designing moral directions under which the whole thing gets generated. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a point to make, very short one. So my recommendation is, as of now, right, you don't use generative AI for decision making, right? It should not make decisions. Maybe it can help you with the data, right, with the summarization, etc. That may aid in decision making, which should not be making decisions for sure.
And I just, Rohit, if you want to continue, I know you, Saumir, covered a bit about on the environmental aspect, right? So now my question, and all of you can answer this because it's pervasive, I would say, that the impact that it is going to have, right, on running these models and training these models and the amount of power consumption that it's going to take, will it eventually surpass the benefit that we are going to see in the long run, or the other way around? It's a very subjective thing, I know, but then wanted to understand your views.
See, my answer in 2 lines would be that initially everything is unoptimized, right? And slowly when you see the benefits of it, right, you will slowly find ways to optimize it and how to reduce energy costs, etc. So we'll be soon reaching that point, right, where cost of running these models will be far lower than the benefits that we gain from these models, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with Rohit, where AI itself will be used to optimize or how to reduce the the power cost or the computing cost, all of that. So I mean, I'm just going a bit on an ethical direction where we speak about deep fakes being produced or something, and so a lot of work has already been started where AI algorithms for identify the deep fakes or images or the videos is already in place. So we are going to be slowly entering in a world where AI will fight AI or something to find the right answer. In fact, if you see the underlying structure of GenAI, which is generative adversarial network, their AI fights with AI. One is discriminator, one is generator. They fight with each other, and then the generator wins, and then it gives the outcome to you. So that is that is the way it is going to be in future for all of the problem as well. Yeah.
I think it's a law of physics. I mean, it will come to a point, and the good part is, and I'm sure Hardeep would touch upon it as well, a lot will rely on the infrastructure providers to take proactive steps to do that. Because it's all not only about emission, it's all about sustainability, whatever, both material to consumption, right? And the good part is, I mean, for the lack of time, there's enough technologies that are being made available that would bring down at the infrastructure level itself to make this work. But we are not there because we haven't predicted where this will land, right? But I think the journey on both sides will coexist. And personally, I'm a technology optimist, right? So I believe I haven't seen a place where we hit a bottleneck that technology has not been able to solve. So I'll stop there.
So I think I was trying to address that point during the initial kind of opening as well. I think the reason we believe that hybrid AI helps with that whole premise that it is becoming cost prohibitive is that because you are able to offload. So there are two components to it. You have a training component to it, and you have inference component to it. Training probably is much smaller part of it because once you train the model, you can always go back. But because you have billions of queries, right? So today search is like 10 billion queries in a day, or 60% is on the mobile, right? So if you are able to offload, let's say some of that moves to generative AI because that is more human-like, you don't have to go through multiple links. So you will have to figure out ways to offload. So that's number one. And there are and then when I talk about the models, right, there are two trends. You have the LLMs going really big, but then there are you are quantizing it so that they can run on the edge device as well. So that helps you with both the cost as well as the energy component as well, because you are now running it on a low-cost device, and only the components which you cannot run locally because you don't have enough memory or the horsepower, those get offloaded to the cloud. And we have 5G, so Qualcomm wireless, I think I have to bring 5G in. So we have 5G and then probably 6G, where you are able to, you are always connected, you have good bandwidth available to you, so the latencies is not as big a deal as well. And then last component is, because if you run it on device, you can do a lot more personalization. The device already knows where it is, right, what your favorite food is, what your favorite restaurants are. You could do some of those things also because of this local knowledge, and then you can train the model locally as well, personalize it much better.
Sure, thanks. So I'll have, oh, okay.
Sorry. So I'll just add a different perspective to this. So there is a reason why GPT-2 does not work well and GPT-3 has worked well. It has both the amount of training that it has gone through and the training data itself. So basically the number of parameters that are there in the LLM have to be proportional to the amount of data it is trained on. Otherwise, it's not able to figure out all the intricacies of how the knowledge is spread out.
True.
So now the problem is, you take GPT-3, you ask it a medical question, it answers. You ask it a physics question, it answers. You ask it a sociology question, it answers. Why such variance? I mean, I don't need it. If I'm trying to create a medical LLM, I need it to teach general logic and the field of medicine. That's how we are experts in, a BTech is an expert in his own field. You don't have a person who is BTech who is expert in every field that is there. So you actually, if you can actually figure out where to cut off general training and where to kick off, start off specific training, and if that is what is, the training methodology that can get employed, I think you'll have much shorter, smaller LLMs, but with the same and even better capability as the large language models that you have.
Fine, I have the last question, and I want everybody to take maybe 30 seconds because I want to also open it up for questions. Is generative AI a threat to employment?
This is something that everybody asks and everybody is worried about. So again, I'm fond of giving examples, so let me give you an example of what happened with the Hollywood script writers. Okay, so they went on a strike, and that strike was there for almost like 4 or 5 months, and the strike was against one thing: you cannot use ChatGPT or generative AI to create Hollywood scripts. Now, you understand the threat, you understand the kind of perception that people are carrying in minds as to where all can this intrude. Of course, anything new, any new technology that comes in has an impact because it's doing a job of what the person was doing. That was true for machines. That was true when mechanization came in. That was true when steam engine came in. That was true for every technological evolution that has happened till date. But still what happens is, whenever a technology comes in, with it also comes in different kind of requirements. And to fulfill those requirements, which were not there earlier, now to fulfill those requirements, you definitely need people. Of course, those people will have to be trained differently. So saying that it won't impact jobs may not be the right, it may not be a yes or no answer. The kind of work that the AI would start working on will definitely get impacted, but there will be alternative works that would be alternative jobs that will end up creating, which will definitely help in terms of getting. So it's a very diplomatic answer, you might say, but the fact of life is, it will take, there will be a time gap between the two things that I'm talking about. But yes, eventually the jobs with a different kind of a training will get generated due to AI as well.
Sure, thanks. Yes, of course. But in 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, just 2-3 lines. So everyone talks about, training data, training model. Turn the table round, train the people. Here you got the answer. So training data, training machine is a few people job, but training humankind is all of us. We need to do, and we'll be surviving. Generative AI is something like, sitting a smart person close to you, and you don't know how to talk to him, what to talk to him, how to get the right answer. So you will be equally, fooling yourself if you don't make use of it. So the answer is that train the people. We are all going to be there with something in hand.
Yep. In 30 seconds, please.
I think in 1 second the answer is no. I think both Abhay and Vikas touched upon it. The skilling requirements will be different. It's interesting that you have to know how to write your prompts, if I go back to this conversation, to make it more human and natural. So I think if you change the skilling requirement, look at the autonomous driving as a corollary, right? And people thought that all the drivers, it's become moved from there to more assisted driving. That's a good analogy to think about, saying, if you see how the autonomous driving is evolving, you can think about GenAI evolving in a similar direction.
It's more of an enabler rather than...
Yeah, exactly.
Rohit?
See, I think in every decade, right, there's a technology that actually promises a bright future, right? So in 2000, it was, let's say, internet and softwares, right? Then smartphones were in early 2000, right, 2010 around. Now I think it's Gen AI, right, which actually promises a very bright future. So the kind of work that humans are doing, right, it will actually, from this orbit, it will go to this orbit. Maybe it will enable us interplanetary travel or something like that, right? But yes, for our promising future, right, we need a technology like Gen AI, right, that will actually change what everyone is doing, right? And that becomes automated, and then human works on the next level of work.
Hardeep?
I think I'll give you two answers, but I'll keep it short. From a very selfish perspective, I do not want to do minutes of the meeting. I do not want to generate PPTs summarizing things. I think those tasks could be easily offloaded, and that frees up your bandwidth to do more. So that will be one trend. But then there is other trend, which I think everybody talked about. In the near term, there could be hit where you could have probably people with certain skills not knowing how they can kind of upgrade themselves and do it. But longer term, I think it'll still be net positive. So that's a easy way to look at it. And that's how all the, and I'm going with just historical data, that's how every technology shift, every generation shift has happened that way as well. So I think that will continue is what I think about.
Sure. Sure.
So motivation, that's the single word I'll say. And as long as motivation doesn't exist in machines, or until we figure out a way to put motivation into machines, we're all safe.
Nicely put. So I'll open it up for questions if anybody has any questions for the panelists. Mike?
Just like that. Go ahead, go ahead.
It's audible.
Yeah, so that is what I was talking about when I said anomaly detection. So what we did with along with Google, we used Google's AI tools for Vodafone in UK. We took all the data that comes up from the network for its performance enhancement, put it on the machine learning tools that Google has, and then that helped. It of course takes time in order to detect and identify what kind of an anomaly is due to what reason and so on and so forth. But once in place, it became very easy in order to handle the network performance much better, just because there was this anomaly detection tool which was working at the back end for improving the network performance. Does that answer your question? Sorry? This case study or use case? I think there will be a few white papers on this, both on Google and on Nokia site. You can find it.
Any other questions? Kishore.
See, basically, yeah, I mean, AGI is a way to put it. So the way the training of LLMs is happening, we're nowhere close to AGI. I mean, let me put it that way, if to clarify that part. So the intelligence of humans comes from very different means and manners, not from the way, you don't look for the next word after seeing last 5 words. I mean, the way we synthesize text, the way we create art is very different from how machines are actually being trained to create art. So even without language, see, again, I'll go back to my point of language, logic, and data all are tightly fused in an LLM, but in a human way of thinking, they are very separate entities. I reason about the logic, language also. If you give me a sentence, I can actually reason about the logic, and I can reason about the logic of that logic. That is the second order thinking I have, which machines don't have at this point of time. Or at least they don't know how, we don't know how to make them do that. So that is the problem. And all the large language models that are there currently, how they work, why they work, it's all black box. Nobody knows. I mean, to be able to understand it, there have been a lot of visualizations, there have been a lot of analysis, there are a lot of studies that have been done on trying to understand how they're, but nobody is there yet. So we do not know how to get a hang of them. It's like you put a large animal into a room, gave it a lot of food, gave it a lot of trained it, made it big, and then pushed it out onto the world. Sometimes he'll do what you want, sometimes he'll do what you don't want. That's the state we are in. We have to get a lot of handle on the models before they can evolve to the next level, and they're nowhere close to being an AGI right now. See, we do not know that AGI is there until we see it. So I'm not happy with the way you're terming it, saying is anybody trying to do AGI? I mean, how do you know this path leads to AGI? Nobody knows that. So that's the problem. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. It was an absolute pleasure to moderate the session, and thank you for participating. Have a good evening.